All right, heroes. Here I am. It's about 2 minutes after 1 o'clock. Glad to see my top twos right there in the front row. Kathy and Karen. Andrew is here. Bless your heart from Nashville. I take that as a compliment, Andrew. Thank you, Andrew, for saying bless your heart from Nashville. People just joining me for the first time might think I'm a little bit gabby here, but I'm seeing some old friends in the chat, and this isn't one of your like 90-second YouTube videos. I used to make a lot of those. I still make them from time to time. But for the most part, now I like to hang out with people. So I just think it's more fun to have an open conversation. But you should know before you click off is that this is a discussion about the answer or answers to the question, is there one right way to be Jewish? And many people have different opinions about this. I have my opinion. I'll speak for some other people briefly, but I will share with you my answer or answers to this question. Can I have more than one right answer to this question? Is there more than one right way to be Jewish? We'll see. So what we're doing right now is a live recording for the Jew Curious Show podcast. I love this format where get a few people in the room together to share their thoughts. I'm going to give some of my thoughts about this topic, and then I'll read off what people are writing in the chat. So if you'd like to be involved in this discussion, I would love it if you would speak up. You know, just say hello to your friends. People in this chat have been coming for a little while, have made some friends, and I love to see them, high-fiving each other in a textual way. But if you have questions, certainly ask your questions about this topic as well. I will say it helps me if you're asking a question to put a question mark on it, because then it makes it easier for me to see it in the chat. And sometimes I miss things. That happens. I like to come back wherever I can. And if you're watching this and you don't get to ask a question, but you think of one later, or you're watching this later on the replay and you have a question about this topic, feel free to throw that in the comments to this video. I'll also say if you happen to like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I'm seeing some thumbs up already. That's amazing. I haven't even been talking that long. And I'll also say that if you're not subscribed to this channel, I highly recommend that you subscribe to this channel. And what that does is it kind of gives you a heads up when things are going on. Lately I've been doing a live just about every day, and I like to let people know in advance when those are, so you can pick the topics that are interesting to you and show up for that discussion. But in any case, I'm about to start with the podcast recording, which means I put my radio announcer voice on. And maybe I'll have some pause for some sound samples and things like that. So don't be alarmed if it feels a little bit unnatural. Sometimes life's supposed to feel a little bit unnatural till we learn the new natural. So let's do this. Hero, have you ever wondered, is there one right way to be Jewish? There seem to be so many different ways to choose from, and people have strong opinions on this. I'll give you my answer, or answers, right after this bass. Take a little pause for a sample of silence for editing purposes. Thank you, Ron Snow, for that warm introduction. Thank you, Joey Weissenberg and the Hadar Ensemble, for those inspiring opening beats. Thank you so much to the peeps who have showed up for this live studio recording. And most of all, thank you, Hero, for listening to the Jew Curious Show podcast. If you haven't already, might I suggest that you go ahead and subscribe to this podcast. All you have to do is tap a button, or maybe even just a little picture of a button on your smartphone or podcast listening device, and once you do, you will auto-magically download all future episodes of this podcast, plus get access to our whole archive of coming up on about 40 shows at this point. I think this is going to be number 40, if I got my order correct. But I'm really excited to learn with you today, seeing a lot of chatter in various digital platforms, social media, things like that. People have ideas about the right way to be Jewish, and very strong opinions about, let's say, the wrong way to be Jewish. And I've got some opinions myself, but I thought it important in a time where we tend to divide from each other when we might be better off pulling together and recognizing and appreciating each other's differences. I wanted to tackle this important question. These answers that I'm going to give are my opinion, derived from life experience, study of Torah for about 11 years now going on, and just the teachers that I've learned from as well. So I'm going to give my opinion. It's not going to conform to every other rabbi's opinion, certainly, or every other Jewish person's opinion, or every other not Jewish person's opinion. But I want to share my opinion and ask you yours. If you happen to be in the live studio audience, please share your opinions on this topic as well, and please ask your questions. When you ask questions, you're not only getting an answer for you, you're getting an answer for every other person out there who has that question. And I firmly believe if you have a question, somebody else has that question too. So please be brave, take one for the team, and ask the questions that you have, and we'll get back and I'll answer them as well and as thoroughly as I possibly can. Sometimes a little too thoroughly. I tend to go on and on, but that's a family trait apparently. People in my family say that I, and also my father, who was another teacher and preacher of sorts, we tend to speak in sermons. So that happens. I'm going to own it rather than reject it. So let's take a look and see who has joined us for this session. We've got Kathy and Karen sitting in the front row, bi-coastal. We've got Kathy is here from California, and Karen is here from Philly. I see y'all just about every time we go on the air, so I really appreciate your support of this community. I'm seeing Andrew from Nashville. I'm seeing Andrew from Nashville, who says, "Shalom and bless your heart." This is a controversial saying in the South. Some people take "bless your heart" as an insult, and I sometimes clarify, at least where I grew up in East Texas, if someone says "bless your heart," that's actually a compliment. If somebody says it in the third person, however, that's an insult, right? If you say, "Oh, it's nice to see you, bless your heart," they're wanting God to bless your health, your heart, your soul, etc., whatever is represented by the heart. But often you'll hear in gossip and things like that, "Well, I hear she's fallen off the wagon, bless her heart," or "I hear that she's this other," or "I hear that he has failed in some respect in his life, bless his heart." So bless your heart is a compliment. Bless his or her or their heart may not necessarily be a compliment. So that's my lesson on Southern dialect for the day. Now we'll get back to some Jewish stuff. CJ is here. He says, "Hello from the tattoo parlor, looking at getting Hannah Senish's poem, Eli Eli, tattooed on me in Hebrew." There's lots of different ways to express Jewish thought and Jewish identity. Many people don't get tattoos, but I know just as many people just about who do get tattoos to express some Jewish thought or Jewish value. Edith is coming in from a beautiful day in New York, New York. Welcome, Edith. Val says, "Hey, y'all," from Florida, speaking my language. And we got Budrod, "Howdy, y'all," from Georgia. Am I attracting a Southern audience? I can't be sure, but I certainly wouldn't eschew one. Eschew? Gesundheit. Zach Russell is here from Virginia Beach. Nice to see you, Zach. Gerard says, "Shalom, shalom." So shalom, shalom, back at you, Gerard. Trig is joining us, dropping in for a few minutes. Nice to see you, Trig. Trig is one of our friends from the Jew Curious School. Always nice to have you here, as well as some other students in here as well that I see. All right, everybody, welcome. And let's get down to business. Before we do, just a couple of quick housekeeping announcements. If you are listening to this later on and you would like to participate in a live studio recording, all you have to do is find me on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com. That's a very popular website you might have heard of. Look for Rabbi John Carrier, and if you find my channel page, you'll see the live recordings that I have coming up, and you can just click on one of those, set a reminder, it'll notify you when I'm live, and you can be here having this discussion with me. I've done a bit of a shift lately. I'll cop to this in my podcast format for the first several, I'll say, dozen episodes of the Jew Curious Show, it was really focused on interviews of teachers and experts and rabbis and authors and musicians and artists and just plain friends of mine that I wanted to share with you. Lately, I've been doing more, I wouldn't say solo shows. It's kind of a solo show because it's just the sound of my voice talking. And you know, if you're into that, that's cool. I hear it probably more than I need to, but anyway, you do you. But I do like to include this audience, and how we're doing that is through the chat in YouTube Live. So it's just my voice, but I like to share what other people are saying because I really feel drawn to meeting the needs of this Jew curious community that has come together around the kind of stuff that I like to learn and teach about. And so my first priority in anything that I teach is serving the people that I'm teaching, especially right in the moment. And so if I pick a guest, some guests really resonate with the audience, some really don't or don't resonate with everybody, and it could be a hit or miss. But I feel like if I'm doing this in a live format where people get to ask me questions about the topic, then we're really having a conversation, not just with me and one of my teachers or me and one of my friends, but between me and you, between me and the Jew curious folks out there, and you're my absolute priority as far as serving you with the Torah that I like to teach, with the values and the experiences that I have gained, and that's why I've been doing this shift. I just thought I'd bring you into the loop. If you're listening to this on the podcast and you're like, hey, where the heck are all the interviews that I've come to know and love? I'm not kicking those to the curb. We will have some of those in the future. I've recently recorded a couple that I'm actually pretty excited about that I want to share with you. One is Rabbi Danny Eskow of onlinejewishlearning.com, has some incredible stuff to teach. She does online tutoring in Hebrew and synagogue skills like chanting Torah and leading prayers and things like that. And we've got an exciting kind of collaboration in the works that I want to share with you. So that's going to be coming out in the next week or so. And another one with a teacher and friend of mine, Rabbi Daniel Vezrub, and that's going to be coming out in the next week or two as well. But in the meantime, I like to just hang out with the Jew curious crowd and answer the questions that you have. And so before we start on the topic at hand, I just want to take a look at if there are any questions. Let's see. Kathy shares, yes, subscribe to prevent FOMO, fear of missing out. That's a thing I remember hearing about a few years ago. College kids especially get this, and I've been a college kid a couple of times. You want to hang out with people. You don't want to leave because you're afraid something exciting might happen if you do. So that's a great reason to subscribe to the podcast or subscribe to the YouTube channel. Seeing what are the questions here before we get started. Bud Rod from Georgia says the fact that there are Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Yemenite, and the modern conservative Reform Reconstruction movements, as well as Orthodox renewal, what have you, show a quick... I just lost my voice there for a second. Show a quick snapshot of the diversity in the family quilt. To be sure, I love that, especially coming from another Southerner. I love that image of the family quilt. CJ asked, do you accept patrilineal Jews? I know conservative halakha says matrilineal descent, but wasn't patrilineal pre-Babylonian exile? We talked about that a little bit yesterday when we were talking about the question, is Judaism a race? And part of that gets into, okay, how do we identify who's a Jew and who's not a Jew, and how there are various communities that have a different take on that topic today. And so just because I'll say and just because I know if I say I'll come back to it, I might forget before the end of this podcast. So I'll answer that my personal take. I'm a Jew who's just a Jew in the sense that I'm a Jew like every other Jew out there. I do tend to gravitate toward conservative communities, and my smicha, my ordination, was in the conservative movement. So when it comes to performing religious ceremonies and things like that, I do religious ceremonies for Jewish people who are defined as those who have either a Jewish mother or have converted to Judaism. So the short answer is no, but I want to play with the word accept a little bit, because I don't reject people's expression of their Jewish identity based on my particular movement's standards for that. What it means is, if I'm doing a wedding, if I'm officiating at a ceremony of some sort where Jewish status plays a part of that, like a bat mitzvah or a bar mitzvah, in the communities that I serve, we define Jewishness through either matrilineal descent or conversion. However, if I'm in a community where they accept patrilineal descent, I'm not going to say, well, that person's not really Jewish, or that person doesn't count on a minyan. That's on that community to decide, right? I don't believe you can really self-declare Jewishness and just say, you know what, I just decided I felt Jewish one day. I do believe there should be a process, but I know different communities have different standards of that process. And my job is to sort of teach those different standards as they exist in the world. You know, I have my own personal preferences, but I'm not going to say I don't accept somebody because of the type of Jew that they are. I think that really strikes at the heart of what we were going to talk about today, which is there one right way to be Jewish? And the answer, for me, is no, and also yes, and maybe a sometimes. I'll put it that way. So for me, there is no one right way to be Jewish, in the sense that the Jewish family is a diverse one. As Buddy was pointing out earlier, there's different population groups like Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Yemeni. These different population, you could sort of call them ethnic groups, but I don't want that term to be confused with race or biological origin. Ethnic, I mean in the sense of kind of identifiable groups of people with common customs and things like that. So in that sense, there are different ethnic groups, all of which, I'll say almost categorically, recognize each other as Jews. And again, there are some very rare exceptions to that that usually have to do with personal bias versus group traditions. And so a lot of the times when we get into, well, I'm Jewish and you're not, or you're Jewish and I'm not, we have to drill into where people are coming from when they say those things. But so in the ethnic sense, there's no one right way to be Jewish. And we have a diversity of denominations, or sometimes called movements or streams or what have you. Denominations is kind of a Christian word, but English is kind of a Christian language, as my teacher, Rabbi Dorf, points out. But there are different, let's say, organized groups that have some identifiable things in common that distinguish them from other organized groups within Judaism. And you could say that when somebody is deciding to be a part of that group, they're making a decision that this one is the right group for me, right? It's different from Ashkenazi or Sephardi. That has a little bit more to do with family background, not necessarily blood, but like what community you came into or found yourself in when you were born, or gravitated toward when you converted. That's more about history. Denomination can be kind of history as well. But for the most part, I'll say Jews recognize each other as Jews. Within the organizations and the structures and the institutions that help hold these different groups together, or maintain integrity within the group, there are policies that say, our way is the right way. For the most part, I'll say in the Reform movement, in the conservative movement, in the renewal movement, and the Reconstructionist movement, the voice sounds more like, here is a right way to be Jewish. This is right for me. This is right for us. This is right for the people in this room. And I want to go out on a limb and say that even among probably a lot of Orthodox Jews, maybe even the plurality or majority of Orthodox Jews as people will look at other Jews and say, they're Jewish, right? They're conservative Jew. That's not the way I'm Jewish. That's not the way I do my Jewishness. Or Rabbi Hirschfield, a very open and pluralist Orthodox rabbi who I've had the privilege of learning with, will use Jew as a verb. Like how do you Jew how you Jew, right? How do you express your Jewishness? And I would imagine on a personal level, most Orthodox Jews would say that person is expressing themselves in the conservative way of being Jewish. That's not for me, but I'm not going to question their identity and can extend that to Reform, Renewal, Reconstructionist, what have you. On a more official level, within Orthodoxy, there have been decisions made about, well, this is the right way to do Jewishness, and would question the Jewish identity of other people, especially converts, because they converted with rabbis who the Orthodox don't recognize as rabbis. And so, but I don't want to paint Orthodoxy with a broad brush, because I really believe, and this has been my personal experience with people who feel really at home in Orthodox communities, they don't question my Jewishness or other conservative Jews' Jewishness. That's just not for them, right? Any more than their thing is right for me. But for the most part, you can't find a strain of Judaism, I'll say again, for the most part, that says, okay, my way is the only right way to be Jewish, or your way is definitely the wrong way to be Jewish. On official levels, and I'll say especially at the extremes, and in discussions these days, especially on Twitter, where we're getting into women's health care debates and things like that. There are people expressing religious values through legislation. Twitter is afire right now with people talking about right ways to do religion, wrong ways to do religion, right ways to do politics, wrong ways to do politics. And in every group discussion, you will find people kind of go into their corners, taking a hard fundamentalist tack and say, no, my way is the right way. Every other way is the wrong way. And I'll remind people that every group has its fundamentalists. There are fundamentalist Christians. There are fundamentalist Muslims. Imagine there are fundamentalists of other religions. And we certainly have ours, who are more than happy to tell you that their way of doing Jewish is the only right way of doing Jewish. And it has always been thus, that their fundamentalist interpretation of Judaism is faithful both to the origin of the Torah, but the entirety of Jewish history. Every way that they do things goes all the way back to a conversation between God and Moses at Sinai, and has been unchanging ever since. And I want to own that about our people. Because if you look at Shmuel Aleph, the first book of Samuel, where the people were begging for a king, and they said, we want to have a king because we want to be a nation like any other nation. And I often quote the saying, Jews are just like everybody else, only more so. And I don't know where that came from. I got to find the source of that quote, because I think it's remarkable. But just like everybody else, we have our fundamentalists. We have our binary thinkers. We have people willing to say, my way is the right way, every other way is the wrong way, or what my rabbi teaches is the only way to interpret Torah, which I think is a natural human tendency. People are looking for security. People are looking for safety, especially people who are coming from a place of insecurity, or having had uncertainty in their life, or having had trauma, or having had their faith jarred in some very real way. People are often longing for one right answer. I remember when I was in management consulting, let's say about a dozen years ago, before I decided to go to seminary, I did a lot of projects for clients, and I like to say I did math for a living, where I would go into a bank or a law firm and help build some sort of computer model that helped them count their money or bill their clients or something like that. But I was a problem solver. And people would often bring me in when they had a problem with their information systems, and they'll say, okay, what's this problem and what's the solution? And what I learned was that clients who are paying you money, especially by the hour, never ever like to hear the answer, it's complicated. They always want to hear that the problem is simple, the solution is simple, which translates into fewer billable hours, but nobody likes to hear it's complicated. The problem is, in Judaism, everything is complicated. The last couple of nights, I've been on Twitch doing the Jew Curious Late Show. If you're curious about what that is, look up twitch.tv, and when you get there, look for Jew Curious, and you'll find me. I've been doing some teaching in the evenings on the Mishnah. And reading the Mishnah, reading this, let's say, early codification of Jewish law, this early redaction or compiling of oral tradition and comments about the Jewish law, starts with a simple question. What's the right time to say the bedtime Shema? Right? Again, this is one person looking for one right answer. Okay? When do I know it's nighttime in which I can say the nighttime Shema? Because I know I'm supposed to say the Shema. This is a particular Jewish prayer, if you're not familiar. I know I'm supposed to say it at night and in the morning. Well, the first question is, what's night? What constitutes night? Is it, 5 p.m.? Because it's 5 p.m. somewhere, folks. I had to throw that in there. Is it a particular time? Does it go by how light outside it is? But a pretty simple question. What time can I start praying, and by what time do I need to finish praying if I'm praying this nighttime prayer? And right out of the gate, we get at least 3 different answers. I will say everybody kind of agrees you should wait till it's dark, right? It starts with you should wait until the time that the priests can come in and eat their donations, and it then explains it further in the commentary. That is, if they weren't eligible that day because they had some sort of impairment to their priestly status. This week's Parsha talks all about it. If you want to know where that particular rule comes from, take a look at Parashat Emor. We're going to be talking about that here on the YouTube tomorrow, I believe, and so maybe I'll get into it more, where it says, okay, a priest eats donations, right? People bring donations to the temple, and that's how a priest eats, because a priest can't farm, doesn't have his own land, and so he eats donations. But if he has impaired his status as a priest by coming into contact with a dead body, for example, then he's kind of in the penalty box, or he's kind of like out of priestly status temporarily, and then after a certain period of time, he immerses in the mikveh, and then he comes out, and that night when the sun goes down, he's allowed to eat his donations again. And so it says, everybody pretty much agrees. You can start saying the Shema when it's dark, but when can you say it until? And one guy says you can say it for either a quarter or a third of the night, depending on how long the watches are in the walled city. A big group of people say you could do it until the middle of the night, like the precise, let's say, astronomical midnight, which is the precise midpoint between sundown and sunup. But then Rabbi Gamliel comes out and says, oh no, you could do it all night until dawn breaks, right? Until that first beam of light comes up over the horizon, before you can even see the sun. But that first break of dawn, you can do it until that happens. And then it tells a funny story about his sons coming home from a drinking party late at night thinking, oh, I don't really have to say, we can't really say the Shema, Pops. We missed it. We were at the drinking party. We're going to go to bed now. And he says, nope, I don't care how hungover you are. You're going to say your evening prayers because you have until dawn. But my point is, right out of the gate, in the Mishnah, in one of our foundational texts of rabbinic Judaism, which is the kind of Judaism that Jews around the world practice today, the first question gets 3 different answers. And there may be some people who want to follow Rabbi Eliezer and only say the Shema until 3-4 hours into dark. There may be people who want to follow, let's say, the general custom What the Hachamim say is you can say it until midnight, but sometimes you miss it. Sometimes you make a mistake. Sometimes your flight is late, or the Uber doesn't get there on time, or whatever the exigent circumstance is. Another rabbi comes along and says, no sweat, you can say it till dawn. And some people have to depend on that leniency sometimes. Some people depend on that leniency all the time. Folks will push it to the edge wherever they go. But the first Jewish question that's asked in rabbinic law is answered 3 different ways. And to me, anyone who comes out and says there's one right way of being Jewish, my way or the highway, the way, the truth, and the light, to borrow from another text, is rejecting this foundational concept of a multiplicity of answers, which isn't just accepted in Judaism, it is canonized, and I'll say insisted upon. So I want to pause there for a second and see what questions people have. I see a hand waving. I don't know if they're raising their hand or just saying hello. It's Ruthie. Hey, Ruthie, I see your hand. Nice to see you here. Andrew shares, I know Orthodox rabbis who will accept a conservative Reform convert for the purposes of counting for a minyan, but just won't be inclined to give them an aliyah. Or they may say, okay, this person counts as a Jew in my book. And this is me elaborating. That's great to hear. Maybe they don't get the same rights and privileges in the prayer space, for example, but the rabbi, him or herself, doesn't question their Jewishness. Right, there are some people who I recognize as Jews. There are some people I recognize as Jews because they're part of a Jewish community. Maybe they're Reform Jews, and I might have to ask a little bit about their background, and I might not be able to perform a wedding for them just because of my particular affiliations. But I don't question their Jewishness one bit. So Milo's here. Good to see you. I love it when people are waving and giving high fives in the community. Budrad asks a question, which commandment, if any, is key to Jewishness? So I have to say this stumps me a little bit. Somebody else out there might be able to give an answer. I don't know of a particular commandment of the 613 that says, doesn't say anywhere in the Torah like, this makes you Jewish, this makes you not Jewish. We just read stories about Jewish families in the Torah where they talk about, let's say, Abraham and his household, and at one point he is ordered to circumcise or have circumcised everyone in his household, and they are all included in this Jewish family. And as somebody was pointing out earlier, this whole discussion of matrilineal descent versus patrilineal descent is itself an innovation. For the most part, Jewish identity is translated through the patrilineal line and I'll cop to this, early Judaism, a very patriarchal society. I prefer a much more egalitarian expression these days, and I think there's foundational support for that. But it was patriarchal, and a family structure and direction and identity was largely determined by the oldest male in that family, or the oldest, let's say, producing male in that family. And that's just how the society was back then. I'm not gonna knock it. I'm not going to say let's go back to the old ways. There are enough people saying that. Don't need me to help, and I don't believe that. But that's how it was. At one point, during a time of, I'll say, exigency, the rabbis decided it was important to shift that transmission of identity from the patrilineal line to the matrilineal line. The explanation given is the explanation often given is that you can always tell who someone's mother is. There are certain circumstances in which you can't always tell who somebody's father was, especially in times of war. especially in times of oppression, when sexual violence is used as a weapon of war, and a woman may be attacked and violated, and an offspring comes from that. But you don't know if it was her attacker or someone she was in a consensual relationship with, but you know the child is hers. And so there was a shift a couple of thousand years ago to traditionally recognize Jewishness through the mother, and that has pertained and persisted for a couple of thousand years. More recently, in the last century, the Reform movement made a shift to say we're going to identify someone as Jewish if either their mother or their father is Jewish, and they have a sense of Jewish identity. They were raised knowing that they were Jewish, right? And so it's not just some people were talking about this yesterday in our live. It's not necessarily easier because because in some communities that recognize matrilineal descent, if your mother was Jewish, if your mother's mother's mother was Jewish, you're Jewish. No conversion necessary. But I've heard of Batei Din in the Reform movement saying, okay, maybe your mother's mother's mother was Jewish, but you weren't raised with a Jewish identity. You should still go through a conversion process. So in that way, it's a little bit stricter of a standard. My take is that communities in conversation with each other get to set the standards for those communities. And this is, I'll say, very much in keeping with Jewish tradition. We've never had a Jewish pope or a figure who was the same level as the Pope is to Catholicism. I'll say at least since the time of Solomon. We had some Jewish monarchies. There was almost never any one person who was invested with both religious authority and political authority. Even from leaving Egypt, we had Moses as one kind of leader and his brother Aharon as a different kind of leader that separated, let's say, political and military leadership from religious leadership from the very beginning of our life as a people coming out of Egypt. And even in the times of the Jewish monarchies, there was a separate priestly class, right? And nowadays, when a lot of the leadership devolves to teachers in communities, there's no one kind of uber teachers that tells all the teachers what to do. There's no one rabbi who's in charge of telling all the other rabbis what to do. There are some organizing bodies and things like that, and there are some committees that form on, okay, what's kind of an acceptable band of variation in which we behave. But most of the decision-making in Jewish life, and not just in Jewish law, but in custom and practice and how communities form themselves, devolves to the local community and has, I'll say, almost always been thus. I never like saying never and always, but for the most of Jewish history, matters of law and custom and acceptability and unacceptability have evolved to local communities where everybody knew each other by sight. They would get together and discuss things, and a decision would be made that would be binding on the community, but it wasn't from up on high. It wasn't from a Jewish Vatican, if you will. It wasn't from a letter from Jerusalem told people in Poughkeepsie how to be Jewish, right? And so for one person to say, based on their learning with their rabbi, that this is the one right way for every Jewish person in the world to be Jewish is, I'll say, ahistorical. It is not in keeping with the tradition of any Jewish legal text that I've read, or in keeping with the bulk of Jewish legal conversations going back to the time of the Mishnah. But also, so sometimes I really need to wait until people are done with their questions before I start answering half a question. Um, you know, let me say this differently. This is the great thing about live. You all, you get to hear me correct myself and bleeps and blops and clear my throat and stuff like that. I like to cut this stuff out of the podcast. But hey, we're just friends here talking, so let's do this. Bud asks, what's a mitzvah that would bar your support of a person's conversion? When I'm sitting on a Beit Din, and I've sat on a few, and we are talking to somebody about becoming Jewish, we're not sitting there necessarily with a checklist of, do you do this, do you not do that? What we're really looking for is learning. We're looking that somebody has made the commitment to learning enough about Judaism to make an informed decision about whether or not they want to throw their lot in with our family. We're looking for sincerity in that regard. Is this a lark that they think, oh, I'm going to try Judaism this week and I'll try Sufism next week, but I'm here in front of the Beit Din. Like, no, we're looking for somebody who is putting all their chips on the table, right? Somebody who is fully committed, sincerely, who approaches with an intention of having solidarity with the Jewish people. We like to see that people have let's say, studied about the dietary laws and have made some attempt. And I say some attempt because, look, nobody's perfect. And I don't go around inspecting people's houses. But I like to see that people have thought deeply about something that's been a part of our tradition for a long time, have tried some things on, maybe have plans in the future to take that discipline more seriously. I like to see the same thing about Shabbat, that people have attempted to take a day of rest. I'm not going to come to their house on Saturday. I probably don't live within walking distance of them anyway. I'm not going to come to their house on Saturday and say, are you doing Shabbat right? Are you doing Shabbat wrong? One critical thing for me, and this is pretty dispositive in just about any Beit Din you'll be in front of, is are you worshiping any other religion? So if there's somebody out there, and I'm not accusing anybody, but I know this happens, and so I'll just say, for anybody who's listening or watching on YouTube right now, if there's somebody out there who thinks, I'm going to become Jewish so that I can feel closer to Jesus and that will deepen my expression of Christianity, yeah, that's a no-no. So I'll just say that is what lawyers call dispositive. That sort of disposes of the whole thing. So my one, I guess, hit or miss, litmus test, whatever you want to call it, up or down mitzvah, no idolatry. Or not idolatry is a bad word for that, because we don't think of Christianity or Islam or other modern faiths as idolatrous the same way that the Egyptians were. But I'll say, don't be worshiping any other gods. Don't be a sincere part of another religion, thinking that Judaism is just something you can kind of tack on to that. That's not how we do this family. I'll just put it that way. So if anybody, and again, if anybody out there, like, if you want to learn about Judaism with me in order to better understand your committed Christian faith, that's totally cool, right? I love teaching people what I know about Judaism, what I know about the intersection of Judaism and Christianity. Jesus was learning with the rabbis back in the day, and that in the era that the Mishnah talks about, a lot of what Jesus teaches, you could find sources for that in conversations of rabbis in the Mishnah. So I love talking to Christian people about Judaism. I love talking to people of different faiths about Judaism and the similarities, and I'm happy to teach you. But don't try to convert to Judaism if you're still hanging on to something else. Nacho Raj, nice to see you here. Nacho Raj, don't know if I've seen you here before, but I want to acknowledge this really powerful question or statement that you're expressing here. Nacho Raj says, I'm thinking of converting to Judaism, but I'm scared of experiencing anti-Semitism from my friends and family. And that's a powerful statement. That's a hard thing to think about. And I've worked with people who are in the process of converting or considering converting who have the same concern, or who are, and some people, they're afraid of experiencing it. Some people are actually experiencing it. And there's a little difference there. I'm not going to compare people's pain, but some people are put off just by the notion that they might be discriminated against because they see that discrimination in the world. And unfortunately, the world is showing us that discrimination more and more often these days in more and more public ways. And so I don't want to discount that at all. My advice is to study. Maybe you don't tell the whole world or your whole family or all your friends that I'm definitely converting to Judaism because, as you say, you're thinking about it right now. You've got, I'll say, a lot to learn. Only because, and I don't know you, but I'll just say because I've got a lot to learn. I've been doing this Jewish thing for almost 20 years now. Been a rabbi for 5 years. Been studying Torah pretty much as a full-time job for about 11 years now. And I'm still learning. So I'm still thinking about it. I'm still thinking about, okay, how do I want to take my practice to the next level? How do I want to apply more discipline in my life? How do I want to get closer to God? I'm on a path too, is what I'm trying to say. And so I would just, own that you're on a path, start studying, learn about those things that actually improve your life, that improve your connection to either the Jewish people or to God or all of those things. And share with people the things that you love. And what I firmly believe, because I've experienced this myself, is that when people see you loving it, and when people see how it is changing your life or your experience for the better, this isn't perfect, but I feel like at the end of the day, in the long game, that their love for you, because this is friends and family we're talking about, they love you, right? There's something about you that they love that transcends your particular spiritual inclinations. And then when they see you loving something, when they see a person they love loving something and having their life improved by it, their biases won't disappear, but they may moderate. They may melt away. And they may see that this Nacho Raj, I only know you by your YouTube handle, is connecting to something meaningful for them. And that should be supported. And I shared in my own story, you can find it in the archives, about my own journey to becoming Jewish. Several years after I converted, I found out that some of my family members were upset about it. They didn't share it with me at the time that I converted, but only years later, when we were discussing something else, did that come out. But then a few years after that, when I decided to go to seminary, and I thought, well, if they didn't like me being Jewish, they're going to hate this. By that point, they had come around because they saw what it had done for me, and their love for me transcended their fears, concerns, prejudices, misconceptions about Judaism. So I'm not going to say that it's not going to be painful, right? I'm not going to say that you won't experience some of that anti-Semitism. I'm not going to say there's nothing for you to be worried about, because there's plenty for you to be worried about. And you may encounter pain. And it's especially painful when it's people that you're close to. But I would say nurture those relationships, but also nurture your curiosity about Judaism, and know that there will be a day. It might not be immediate. It might take years. It might be never. But my faith is that there will be a day that those kind of prejudices will fall away because they've learned more about Judaism through you, and that learning will dissolve those prejudices to some extent. That's a faith that I have. I can't promise you anything, but that's been my experience and the experience of people that I've been close to. So thank you for the great, but really thank you for sincerely sharing that fear, because I believe a lot of people have that fear, and I'm honored to be able to address it. Gerard says, I'm in the process of, another hero in the chat, Gerard says, I'm in the process of an Orthodox conversion, so this channel may not be right for me. That said, all the best. I'll say all the best to you, Gerard. I hope you haven't, I hope that I haven't transgressed in this discussion by bad-mouthing any particular Jewish denomination or mischaracterizing folks in any extent. I consider Orthodox Jews to be my brothers and sisters, just like I consider renewal, Reconstructionist, Reform, Conservative, gastronomic Jews, my brothers and sisters. I know that they do things a little bit different, at least the rabbis do, than how I do my rabbiing. And so whatever path calls to you, that's the right path for you to be on. I'm happy to learn with you as much as we can learn together. But as I often say to people, your local rabbi who you have a relationship with is the best person to learn from. But you can also have many teachers that can give you a broad perspective. So I wish you all the best as well, Gerard. But that brings me to the other half of my answer to today's question. Is there one right way to be Jewish? Part of my answer is no, in the sense that I don't believe anybody who tells me they have the right way and the only right way. But part of my answer is yes. Is there one right way to be Jewish? And I'll say the right way to be Jewish is the way that's right for you. And what I mean by that is the right way to be Jewish is the way to be Jewish that helps you thrive, that helps you experience deeper meaning in your life, the one path you find that helps you experience greater joy in your life, that you feel more human connections, that you can actually feel comfortable in a community and get to know other people and have them get to know you, and the path that helps you grow. And if you find a path that aids you in your search for meaning, in your experience of joy, in forming human connections, and it helps you grow as a person, that is precisely the right path for you. I feel like I found the right path for me, and I'm not going to say it's right for anybody else. Sometimes I wouldn't recommend it because sometimes it's a hard road to hoe, as we say in the South. But I found the right path for me, and I teach about what I found, but I also like to teach about it in the context of other paths that I'm aware of that might work for people. So I'll say, if you found a path that works for you, and I'm talking to you, Gerard, I'm talking to you, Nacho, I'm talking to you, Kathy and Kay and Greisicle and Edith, and everybody here, if you found the right path for you, then that is the right way to be Jewish. You know, put a little asterisk on that. If it causes you to hurt people, then I take all that back, right? If the right path for you causes you to erase other people's identity, causes you to incite violence, causes you to be deaf and blind to the suffering of others, because there are paths in Judaism like that, then I don't think that that's the right path for anybody. However, if you find a path that helps you thrive, helps you grow, makes you a more compassionate and just and merciful person, then that is absolutely the right path. To quote, I believe, Rabbi Irving Greenberg, the point of Judaism isn't to make you a better Jew. The point of Judaism is to make you a better human. And if you find a way of being Jewish that makes you a better human or makes you feel like you're becoming a better human, that's the right path for you. So that's the other side of my answer. So no, there's no right way to be Jewish. Yes, there might absolutely be a right way for you to be Jewish. And with the side, with a little side dish of, if it hurts people, if it hurts you, I can definitely say that it's the wrong path to be on. So I really appreciate everybody learning this with me today, for asking great questions. As Andrew says, so perhaps there's no one right way to be Jewish, but there are definitely wrong ways. I'll cop to that. I think I'll agree with that. So I think there are some wrong ways to be Jewish. And again, this sounds like me being prejudicial against prejudice groups, maybe not understanding them fully. That's why I'm always trying to learn new things from different teachers. But I'll say, if it helps you grow, if it doesn't hurt other people, that's a path that you should pursue. That is a right path to be on. A right path. Not necessarily the right way for everybody, but a right path for you. I found mine. I teach everything I know so that other people can find theirs. And I'm happy to high five you along the way. So thanks everybody for being here today. Sorry, little pause there, just appreciating all the great stuff that's going on in the chat right now. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this show with some radio announcery kind of things to say. Let me take a little swig of the rocket fuel. Yum. And like a little bulletproof coffee in the afternoon. I really appreciate I really appreciate everybody in the chat who is learning with me today. Most of all, thank you, Hero, for once again listening to the Jew Curious show. If you'd like to get connected with other Jew Curious people just like you, I highly recommend you check out the Jew Curious Community Center. You can find that. What is that, you say? That is a private, lovingly tended, carefully guarded, troll-free Facebook community. If you're into the whole Facebook thing, you can go to jewcurious.show, just like the name of this podcast, jewcurious.show/JCC, as in Jew Curious Community Center, and find out how to connect with us. And I would be woefully remiss if I didn't share that this podcast is made possible by the Jew Curious School. This is a private online learning community where people get together, and every week we study the Torah portion of the week. We take a deep dive into a particular We'll have a full Introduction to Judaism course where you can learn the basics of everything and then take a deep dive on a few topics that people are interested in. But my favorite thing of all is the community forum that we have, where people come in, share their questions, share their stories, share their tsuras, as we say in Yiddish, their pains, and people support each other, and people share answers, and people share hugs, and people, virtual hugs. We'll take virtual hugs. And people share recipes and books they're reading and jokes. And the community that we have built around this learning is what I am personally most proud of and happiest to see. If this sounds like something you might be interested in, go to jewcurious.school/info and find out if it might be for you. Once again, Hero, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please feel free to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and I really look forward to learning with you again in the future. Until next time, Hero. Peace. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and thank you for helping me record another episode of the podcast. I actually got one of these out on the podcast last night, so if you're subscribed to the podcast on iTunes or something else, you can hear our discussion from Monday, and right now I'm in the middle of editing yesterday's discussion, and we'll get today's discussion out, God willing, as well. I really want to make this a multimedia experience, but I really do honestly, sincerely appreciate everybody's participation in putting this podcast together. This was kind of a shift, going from just sort of an interview show and, taking some comments off to the side, see what people thought. I'm really excited by the idea of this community that we have built around this learning, actually making the podcast together. And I think it's going to have a profound impact on the learning of Jewish people and Jew-curious people just like you. So thank you so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. Also, a little bonus for the live people. I've been talking on a couple of these live sessions. I'm not going to put this on the podcast, but I've been talking in a couple of these live sessions that I have been refocused on my health. And I just want to share some good news. Baruch Hashem HaTov Motiv, like bless God who is good and does good. I just got back from the cardiologist a few weeks. So I've been a little bit worried about my health over the last couple of months, had some symptoms that I thought might mean something was wrong with my ticker. And a couple weeks ago, I went to the doctor, had a whole battery of tests, chest x-ray. I don't know if this is like violating HIPAA right now or oversharing. I had a whole battery of tests, chest x-ray, blood work, stress test, all this stuff. Everything came back 100% clean, which the one hand is like good news. It's like, yay, I don't have a heart disease and I don't have any kind of cancer that might be identifiable on an x-ray, 222, keep away the evil eye. But everything came back 100% great. And the doctor, and I've also started to exercise and eat better. And the symptoms that were worrying me are going away. And the doctor said, just keep doing what you're doing. See you in 3 months. And that was actually, getting a little emotional now. That was actually a huge load off my mind. And so I want to share it with the people who have been supporting me this whole time. So thank you so much for being here with me. You are my motivation to keep teaching. The fact that people keep showing up. So as long as you keep showing up, I'd probably teach anyway. If nobody showed up, I'd probably just be, yelling in the wind. But your being here with me every day really inspires me to do my best teaching every day. And it looks like I'm going to be doing it for a little bit longer, God willing, with God's help. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being this great community. So I just can't express my gratitude for that enough. But I will just say, until next time, heroes, peace.